Hello everyone, this is Space Café Podcast and I am Marcus. So Jeff Bezos sunk $10 billion into the Alexa project, right? Rumor has it that he wanted it to be the omniscient computer from science fiction that you can talk to freely. Too bad. I really like the idea and still can't understand why it took more than 10,000 employees to not make it happen. Anyways, maybe they just bet on the wrong horse. For example, not the one that is taking the world by storm at this very moment. And that even from its most bitter competitor, Elon Musk, one of the founders of OpenAI. ChatGPT is a crazy good chatbot that you definitely should make sure to try out. It understands just about anything and has an answer for just as much. I have to admit, it's really, really amazing. And so I thought I'd let him or it or her, or whatever it is, formulate the announcement to our guest today. I'll just read it out loud. The only task was to write an unusual and entertaining text about that very person. And here's the result. Here we go. Welcome everyone to the latest episode of the Space Café Podcast, where we explore the outer reaches of the universe and the hottest topics in space science. Today we are thrilled to be joined by no other than Carlo Buontempo, the director of the Copernicus Climate Change Service at Copernicus ECMWF. Carlo is a mastermind when it comes to understanding the complex and ever-changing world of climate change, and he has some truly mind-blowing insights to share with us today. We'll be discussing whether it is possible to cheat the IPCC, the future of ocean currents, and the role of the Copernicus constellation in monitoring climate change. Plus, we'll be getting Carlo's thoughts on COP27 and how it will shape the future of our planet.
There are a couple of things which might happen. One is my son coming back, and so I will probably have to say hello to him and telling him that I'm recording a podcast. And there is a washing machine that we just brought home that is doing the first cycle, so may generate some strange noise in the background.
So pour yourself a steaming cup of space-themed coffee and strap in for a wild ride with Carlo Buontempo on the Space Café Podcast. Wow, that's pretty cool. Wouldn't you agree? Anyways, let's go.
I am a physicist by training. I've been working on climate-related matter for the best part of the last 20 years. And I am now the director of the Copernicus Climate Change Service at ECMWF, which is the European Center for Medium-Range Weather Forecast.
Wow. So the question of all questions for the countries that are headed for winter, the question of all questions, will there be White Christmas?
Right. And the answer is I cannot possibly tell you, in the sense that not that I just want to maintain the secret, it's just that nobody can at this stage.
Okay.
What we can, and we have been under some pressure to provide information for the winter, especially this winter, with all the implications for the energy mix. And so we were under some pressure to say something about the winter. And the best we can say is that at the stage is that the winter is probably mild overall, but there is definitely a higher than usual chance of a cold outbreak between now and the end of the year. So this doesn't mean that it will be White Christmas, doesn't mean that it will necessarily snow before Christmas, but the kind of event that can lead to easterlies, which are typically associated with cold snap, in winter, in this case before Christmas, the likelihood of this event is higher than usual.
So what is it that forecasters are looking for in weather patterns? What is it that makes you think that the weather is developing in this or that direction?
Okay, there are several factors that are taken into consideration. One is purely statistical. So we know that in a La Nina year, and this is La Nina for the moment. So this is La Nina and Niño are this variation in the sea surface temperature of the Central Pacific. La Nina year means that the temperature in the Central Pacific is lower than usual. And in this condition, a kind of pattern that we call blocking, so where the westerly wind that normally blows from the Atlantic is disrupted and actually we see easterlies, this kind of pattern in La Nina is slightly more likely. So is at the beginning of the winter, and the opposite is likely more likely to be. It's likely to be more westerlies toward the end of the winter in La Nina year. So that's purely statistical. You look at the historical record, and you see this not too strong, but noticeable correlation. The second element, and is the one which, in some sense, we build upon, is the output of the dynamical models. So we run some form of a weather prediction model, if you like, but a model that accounts for the ocean, not only the atmosphere. We run this model for the next 6 months, and we don't run just one. We run an ensemble of the simulation. And actually, to make things stronger, we are not the only one running. So not only the European Center, but the Deutsche Wetterdienst in Germany, Met France in France, and the UK Met Office in the UK, and CMCC in Italy are all joining with their model. And on top of those, we also get the output from Japan, Canada, and the US. So we have this very large ensemble of simulations. We put all those together and we look for what this ensemble of simulation tells us about the future. And the more consistency is the message coming out, the more confidence we have on the forecast. So for this December especially, the vast majority of model, the only exception of the US model, are all going for some sort of blocking. So this disruption of the westerlies, which is typically associated with, or can be associated with, colder than average temperature.
How far into the future can today's weather forecasting safely look? So what is the current moment where you would say, okay, I can do it until here and safely say that this is going to be happening within a certain range, and here I'm not going to be able to talk about it anymore?
Right. Yeah. Well, it depends on a number of things. It depends on the what the pattern itself, and it depends on what is, it's never, you're not never making a forecast in the abstract, in the void. You're making a forecast with respect to your previous knowledge. So it depends what you compare it to. So if you compare it, for instance, to climatology, then in most cases we can do better than climatology in most locations for almost 2 weeks, slightly less. Okay. So 10, 12 days and so or thereabout. Okay. But yes, going back to the blocking situation, if you're in a blocking situation, actually there is very little evolution. So you may be better in that situation in saying it's going to be the same for long. So there are a number of benchmarks. Climatology is one. Persistence is another benchmark. Actually, a benchmark that is often difficult to beat, or it has been historically difficult to beat. Because saying the weather of tomorrow is likely to be similar to the weather of today is quite a good forecast model, a simple one, right? So we use all those sort of benchmark. And nowadays, yes, I would say day 10, 11 are still better than most benchmark. And this is quite remarkable because it's one of these areas in human endeavor where we have been improving steadily over time. So, we gain 2 to 3 days from the moment I was going to university to now. And that's quite remarkable. We have not done anything similar to, financial forecast or any other sort of forecast.
And the reason for that may be the number of sensors that's out there. Is that one of the main players that makes forecasting more reliable or more viable into an even further future?
Well, there's a number of factors. I guess this is one. So we have a lot of observation. On average, we ingest something in the order of 8 million observations per day. So it's a huge number, mostly coming from satellite. And
globally. Globally. Yeah. 80, that was 80.
80, that's right.
Okay. Wow.
And this is particularly, this was particularly important for those regions for which you don't have many stations. So in Europe, satellite improve things, but not as much as they did in the southern hemisphere, where before the satellite era, before 79, we basically had nearly zero observations. Apart from Australia and some part of South America, we didn't
zero.
have. Well,
that is interesting.
I'm exaggerating, but if you look at the distribution of land and sea, over sea, you tend to have very few ships. So you have large swath of the ocean where you don't have observation before the satellite. Then you fly the satellite and you start accumulating observation there. And so all of a sudden, this improves the forecast. And, one of the measures you can look at is the quality of the forecast, difference in the quality of the forecast between the two hemispheres. And there is a noticeable difference between before and after 79. So before and after having satellite, because after, there is still a difference, but it's quite negligible. And before, the difference is huge to the two hemispheres. So satellite for sure, sensor for sure. But I guess that there are at least two other, possibly three other causes. One is the technology to take advantage of the satellite information. So this is what we call data simulation, is getting this information into the model in an efficient way. And this has made significant leap forward, especially in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. The second or the third element is the model themselves. Model got more rich in processes, more complicated, and generally better. And the fourth one that is closely associated to the previous one is just the sheer computational power. So our supercomputer now are much more powerful than they used to be. And this means, for instance, we can run the simulation at much higher resolution. And increasing the resolution is one of the ways in which you reduce the biases in the forecast.
Are there limits to forecasting? I mean, like if you double the power of your current supercomputer you work with, or triple that power, would that also go along with forecasting?
Yes.
Or is there a natural limit?
But there is a natural limit in the climate, probably the weather problem if you want. And this comes from the nature of the problem. So the system is per se chaotic. It's governed by chaos. And because of that, and no matter how well you describe the initial condition, after a while, there are so many possibilities that it's impossible to predict exactly what will happen. Basically, we are not too far from that limit, if you want. We are approaching it, looking at ways in which we can improve the time between now and then. So improving the forecast at day 7, day 10, and so on, which is huge benefit. And also, beyond these couple of weeks, you're looking at other subcomponents of the climate system, the ocean being the one of the most obvious one. And this is the way in which you do seasonal forecast, the one we started discussing about. So if you know the status of the ocean, the Pacific being particularly important, but not only the Pacific, and the sea ice, then you, and to a lesser extent, snow cover and soil moisture. Then you have some, so this driver responds more slowly, or to say better, the atmosphere responds more slowly to those drivers. This driver, have a long-term effect. So it's a bit like going in a bathroom. Once you fill the bathtub with hot water, the bathroom will stay warm for hours, right? So it's a bit the same. If you have an a hot ocean, the atmosphere above it will remain or will keep absorbing energy for some time.
Sure.
So in that way, we gain beyond these 2 weeks. We gain predictability.
So speaking of the oceans, you mentioned La Nina, El Nino, warming of the oceans. Are they changing?
Yes, there is some. Are they changing? Is a big statement. I think is an hypothesis that has been floating for some time. So these are as you say, these alternation in the temperature of the Central Pacific between the cold and the hot phase. The hot phase, the Nino phase, is typically associated with above average temperature for the globe. So that's important when we discuss about, for instance, global warming, because we tend to have the record-breaking year during the El Niño, and La Niña is the opposite. And so they are not periodic. So it's not that you have one and then you have the other. They show some level of clustering. So, for instance, we have now 3 years in a row of La Niña, and we don't know whether the next year will be El Niño will be neutral.
What is Niña again? Cold or warm?
Niña is cold.
Okay, so 3 years of colder temperatures, colder surface
and still
temperatures.
We got very, very warm global temperature. So, in a sense, chances are that next time we'll have El Niño, we may see an even stronger extreme in terms of global temperature. And there's been some speculation that the El Niño is changing, so the frequency of one event is becoming higher. So the future may look more like one of the two, or that the nature of El Niño is changing, so that rather than being on one side. Sorry, just 1 second.
Sure, no problem.
Nicola, stai gravando un podcast. Si podes lo fes l'oi. Pot ser? Gracias. Where was I? Yes. So we were talking about the changing nature of El Niño, La Niña. And there's been some speculation that the nature itself is changing. So rather than having the worms happening in one part of the ocean, the worm is moving in a different part of the ocean. Personally, I mean, I know there is a lot of literature and plenty of articles on all these things. Personally, I find that one of the problem is that we have a small observational record, a short, because these are events that happen maybe every 2 or 3 years. So we have good observation in general for maybe last 30 years. And before then is a bit more, you have to rely on proxies. The observation of the deep ocean are even shorter. So the zooming from this short time series, what changes in behavior or tendency, I think is challenging. So it needs to be taken with some level of care. But there is no doubt that it's an incredibly important phenomenon and is the most important mode of variability of the climate system at the global level.
What about, speaking of the oceans and the Atlantic, what about the currents, the big currents that transport water, the cold water to the surface and the surface water in the opposite direction? There's been quite a little bit of talk in recent years that they're slowing down, maybe even coming to a halt. That would maybe mean something to our livelihoods on this planet. So what's the deal with these currents?
Yes. So these are actually, it's one of these, is basically global conveyor belt that is one of these mechanisms of redistributing heat in many respects between the poles and the equators. And one of the important areas in this process is really the North Atlantic, where you tend to have a lot of this formation of dense water, so oceanic convection this plume going down, and being one of the mechanisms for this overturning circulation, thermoline overturning circulation. And this process is controlled in an important way by the amount of fresh water release from in the area. So the extra release of fresh water from the glaciers, Cleveland in particular, is changing that process as the changes in the stratification of the North Atlantic change the stability of that process. So all of that is expected to slow down the overturning circulation, and it's plausible that this will get at some point to a stop or to a significant decrease. I may not be necessarily up to date with the most recent literature. It's not necessarily my area of core expertise, but my understanding at this stage is that while this is generally believed to be plausible for the future, it's not considered imminent as something happening tomorrow. if he were to happen, then I guess the most severe consequences would probably be for Northern Europe, really, for Europe in general, because it will change almost certainly the temperature in the North Atlantic. And we were talking before about how the atmosphere responds to the surface temperature. So a reduction in surface temperature in the North Atlantic could well cause havoc in Europe. Significant reduction in surface temperature could be.
Meaning that there would be an increase in surface temperature.
No, a decrease in the North Atlantic.
No, not in the water, but on the continent, on solid ground.
No, I would think the opposite, because
okay, so it will get colder.
Yes, that's right. In that case, it will get colder, because in a sense, the process there is that you sink cold water and you bring in warm water from the tropics.
Sure.
If that mechanism blocks, then the cold water will sort of stay there, and then you will have a colder North Atlantic. That's my understanding.
Okay. I was trying to draw connections now because I'm reading The Ministry of the Future at the moment. Okay. So I guess you.
I haven't read it. No, I haven't.
You haven't. It's this is, I guess, a must read amongst forecasters, and so I guess you're late to the game.
Yeah. Well, yes, absolutely. I heard a lot about it, but I haven't had the opportunity yet.
Okay, and it's the opposite. It's like I'm not spoiling anything here, Hope, but it's all about extreme heat waves.
Well, this is something that will happen almost certainly. And we have seen some of those happening already in this last summer. But it's not a good thing, because it is very damaging especially for us as humans. But it's one of those things we are quite certain about. So temperature going up, and the severity, the frequency, and the duration of this extremely hot spell has been going out in the observational record, and our climate simulation, our climate projection, give us confidence that this tendency will continue in the future. So you don't need much to make that forecast.
We just learned, we just learned at the beginning of the climate summit that the temperatures in Europe, they are rising twice as fast as predicted. So it's maybe all pointing in the direction you were referencing.
Yeah, so this came out of this report we published with the World Meteorological Organization a couple of weeks ago in Geneva. And in a sense, it was it had a lot of resonance, this statement, but it's not incredibly new. So we knew that. We have been knowing that for quite some time. And I think we also presented it before, but it resonated with the public, no doubt, because it looks like, why is Europe going so fast? And in a sense, well, it makes the headline, which in a sense, if you're running a large program, is good. But on the other, it may hide some of the real information behind. So for me, the real information, the real element is that if you look at all regions in the world, in the 1960 and 1990, well, in that period, in that 30 years, Europe wasn't warming faster. Actually, it was one of the most slowly warming continent. But all the region in the world got warmer much faster, going from the 1960-1990 period to the last 30 years. So that's really strong. Everywhere, things have sped up. And in that general speeding up of the warming, Europe has warmed a bit faster than other regions. And part of it, I think we understand the processes. Part of it may be due to the loss of sea ice in the European Arctic. That is quite important in the European region. Part of it is the loss of snow cover and glaciers in the mountains that we have many of. Part of is the loss of soil moisture in most of Europe. So, depending on the region you look at, the driving mechanism may be different. And part of it may be just a statistical randomness. These 30 years we got, for some reason, a bit faster. The real important element is that everywhere we got got warmer, and everywhere the warming accelerated between 1960 to 92, the last 30 years.
Am I mistaken? Maybe it's just the bubble I live in and consume my media diet, but I have the feeling that the debate as to whether something is changing has stopped. I think it's now common sense that climate change is a thing.
Yes, I tend to agree with you. I guess depending on your bubble, I would have thought probably this debate was largely over. In the fourth assessment report, so maybe 15 years ago or thereabout. Certainly, it's not debated within the science community anymore. So the climate is changing for sure. I think even the skeptics or the deniers are no longer disputing that point. And even the fact that we are, human activities are the principal cause of it is beyond any reasonable doubt. So, the physics behind. Sorry.
So how far are we lagging behind? I mean, like common lay person's understanding of things and scientific, undisputable knowledge. Is there like what's the time lag in between? 5 years, 10 years, 15 years?
No, I think it's I would say it's not too far from 20. 15 to 20
years.
I would think so. So
20 years ago, you knew what is common sense now.
So 20 years ago would be 2002. 2002, personally, I was still on the fence. I wasn't working directly on climate there, and I was hearing about climate change and having some interest for it, but I wasn't quite sure how real it was. Personally, so I wouldn't have considered myself in 2002 as a climate scientist. So I was, in a sense, probably I'm not representative. But if you look at the assessment report that came out in 2007, so that's 5 years later, by that time, I think that was the moment when the entire community basically said, that's it. There is no doubt anymore. I think the debate at that time was whether it was extremely likely or virtually certain. There was a lot of the debate in the text of the IPCC's finding. So that would be 15 years ago rather than 20. Depending on which side of the community you look at, maybe you get a bit of a bias, but that's about it. And I think nowadays, and I don't know whether this delay is true for all sectors. I think in the case of climate, it is also due to the fact that clearly there are interests behind, and some of the deniers have, without any doubt, been supported and funded by people who had interest in maintaining the status quo, in maintaining the market share, in maintaining. That is quite well documented and clear, and understandable from the point of view of this big corporation. So I think this may have slowed down the process.
How does that feel to you personally? Is it, like you have knowledge and you are certain about things that are being debated publicly for so many years, and there's so many non-believers. It's not a matter of belief. This is science we're talking about here. So it's not about believing things. But how does that feel to you that there's still public debate on such a large scale about such things?
Well, I really like what he said, because I don't think it's a matter of believing. So the motto of the Royal Society is nullis in verba. I won't take anyone's word for it. Right? I want to see the proof. And you show me the data, show me the result, and let me reproduce the result. So in a sense, I think that skepticism is at the basis of science, and it shouldn't be stigmatized. I would do the same. You tell me something, I say, why? Show me. So the fact that there is a debate is not necessarily bad. I think is good. The point, the element becomes what the challenging bit is when the debate is no longer informed by facts, but it becomes just a discussion for the sake of it. So I don't think you can dispute facts, right? So you can, saying you don't believe in the law of gravity doesn't mean anything. Give me another model, give me another evidence that make me change my model. And in that sense, I think it's more the quality of the debate. And this goes back to the debate itself. Having a debate, having a discussion is absolutely fine. Is often not genuine and is often not supported, not of good quality, right? So maybe what we should have is to have better debate. And I mean, years ago when we were, when I was at the Met Office, there were some of us who actually engaged proactively with some of the skeptics, because not all the arguments that the skeptics put forward are trivial. Some are highlight genuine problems and genuine, issues with what we are doing, and I think this should be considered and tackled. But after a while, the people who actually engaged the most realized that most of them were not driven by genuine interest and challenging us on the basis of scientific rigor or approaches, but were driven by an agenda. And then it becomes not a good use of science's time to engage in that process. So, it's challenging. In a sense, I think that what I'm doing now is one of these things where it's beyond the reach of the skeptics. So my day job is to make the data easily accessible, is to ensure the data is well documented, that anyone can use it. And when you start having companies making money out of the data, or academic writing papers, or new business being built, administration running services, well, I think the debate is in a sense over.
This is maybe very theoretical, but is there a possibility that there's a political agenda / bias in all of this, especially considering thousands of scientists and researchers behind IPCC, for example? Is there a theoretical possibility that a political agenda could drive what IPCC is talking about?
I would love that to happen. It would mean that as humanity, we are so incredibly good at organizing ourselves that it would be such a major achievement of humanity that I would be proud of it. The truth is that anyone who has ever had to deal with the IPCC process knows how incredibly complicated and tedious and scrutinized the entire thing is. Hundreds of thousands of comments and review processes. I mean, it would be impossible to hack it even if we wanted, and nobody really wants that. So no, I think it's basically impossible to hack at the system. I mean, even just only the fact that the IPCC is based on peer-reviewed literature. So the IPCC is not generating new evidence; is building upon the evidence that exists and has been published and peer-reviewed. So that's already putting the standard quite high, and cannot ignore piece of evidence that exists. So if there were a piece of evidence, a new piece of evidence, a new article, just saying the opposite, it should have, it should be included and reviewed and accounted for in the IPCC process by design. So given that, being the one who breaks the norm and breaks the agreement, give you a lot of visibility in the science literature, in the science field. So
what if I last question for this. But what if I was a very rich person and I'd say I give each IPCC researcher €1 million to follow my agenda, €1 million for my agenda? Would that break the system?
I don't think so. So, because in a sense, even if you give me a million, me or any climate scientist, €1 million, then I will need to write an article making, a point that goes in the direction you want. And that article will need to be peer reviewed by others blindly. And in most cases, and before being published. So in a sense, there are two possibilities, but I see a lot of problem with the peer review system, don't take me wrong, but is better than other tools that we have. But that process gives some guarantee that what is coming out is good quality, right? Then if it's good quality, so if it's rigorous, it's based on evidence that exists, and it's a good piece of science. In the sense, up to a certain extent, it doesn't matter who gives you the money. So either it's true or it's not true, right? And if it's true, we should account for it. We should consider it. So, I mean, I'm depicting a bit too rosy picture of the peer review system, but I criticized the peer review system many times before. So, nevertheless, it gives some, quite a bit, I would say, credibility to the process and guarantee to a large extent that the outcome is of good, at least of good quality. Not entirely unbiased, but certainly of good quality.
Mm-hmm. It's a safety net.
It's a safety net. I mean, it tends to be a bit conservative as a system in the sense that if you go against the paradigm, you have to provide very strong evidence for it. But as proven before, to be capable of those changes of track. So clearly, if you have an extraordinary claim, you have to provide extraordinary evidence for those claims. And so far, nobody has managed to produce anything credible supporting a significantly different view on anthropogenic climate change. Mm-hmm. I mean, just to reinforce the message, the basic physics behind the climate change has been identified in the late 1900s. So it's not really new rocket science. It's something quite well established and not particularly controversial.
I would like to, when it comes to climate change and atmospheric forecasting, I'd consider myself a layperson. But even to me as a layperson, it's obvious if we bring something to the table, and that is CO2, that is methane, additional gases that haven't been, to this extent, been around before that. To my layperson's perspective, that means something is there that hasn't been there before. So there must be something different. Something is changing. There must be an effect. And so we have to that anthropogenic add on to all of this.
Yeah,
even for my feeble mind.
But interestingly, it's exactly what happened in the 19th century. So I don't think it's a case that this article came out. Tyndall, Arrhenius, and the like came out in this latter part of the 19th century. And it's because, after the Industrial Revolution, the pollution and it was visible, this smoky factory and so on. Yes. And so scientists wonder, what they call the carbonic acid or the like, what was the impact of it in the addition of it into the atmosphere? What was going to happen? And so, especially Arrhenius made a back-of-the-envelope calculation suggesting what could be the climate sensitivity, what we call now climate sensitivity, the response in temperature to a doubling in CO2 concentration, and came out with a number that is not too dissimilar from the kind of numbers we're discussing now. So it's quite remarkable that not only that the question came out at industrial revolution, but also the fact that the finding can be obtained with some, not necessarily too straightforward, but not difficult either, calculation made with pen and paper. So
fascinating.
I think that's give us some confidence. I also agree with your description. We are adding something into the system, and Disney must have some impact. So we are a piece of rock orbiting around our star, and the temperature of the planet depends on how much energy we absorb and how much energy we send out. So without atmosphere, we will have one side that is boiling hot and the other really cold.
Yeah.
And the atmosphere managed to attenuate this fluctuation. But even with the atmosphere, in the absence of any greenhouse gas effect, we will have a temperature that is some 30 degrees colder than it is now, right?
Wow.
So the reason why we get this comfortable temperature of around 300 Kelvin is because we have greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. So that's what makes the balance, relative balance, work in our favor. Now, if we add the species that are active in the infrared, so methane, CO2, NO2, and water vapor, then this will capture more of the alkaline or outgoing long-wave radiation. And so clearly this changes the balance of the planet. The only way of compensating it is to increase the temperature. So it's logic. It doesn't. The basic of it, the basic behind, is really quite straightforward.
It's not rocket science.
Not.
Yeah. To me, next to the origin of life, the existence and the complexity of the atmosphere is next to a miracle, wherever that miracle comes from. Because I mean, like, if you, and I'm repeating myself now to some of our audience because I like that comparison with the apple and the apple peel so much. So if you know that analogy, if you shrink the Earth down to the size of an apple, that the atmosphere will be about the thickness of the apple peel, which is so incredibly visual and interesting to me because you see the fragility of this place and how thin that atmosphere is, and it's still, and at the same time, it's life-giving. It's our safety net on this place, because if we take a look at our neighbor Mars or Moon, this is when there's no atmosphere. This is what we're ending up with. So I find that a true miracle around our planet.
Yeah, I mean, someone says when you look at these images taken from satellite or from the mission to the moon and so on, where you see this tiny layer, blue layer around our planet, and you think that that's the only place in the universe where we are certain there is life. Well, I think put things in a different perspective.
Absolutely. I think we need more visual, a lot more imagery to take a hold of that miracle that we're experiencing.
Yes, I think you're right. Because we often discuss with the team at ECMWF the need of improving our
communication skills.
Well, communication. Oh, sorry, I managed to unplug myself. Not only communication skill, but also just the visualization part. It's so important to be visual, to have something. You can write 2,000 words essay and then not convey the message. And if you have the right image, the right visualization, then you convey in a few seconds. So you're right. It's extremely important.
So, Carlo, we have very clear indication that things are changing. How much more data do we need? Why are you still looking for data out there? We know that we have a different place now than it was a couple of decades ago, and that we need to, and I'm sparing the words here, I would like to say we need to act right now.
Yeah, so I don't think actually it's a matter of more data. I agree with you. I think we have plenty of data already. So I wouldn't call for generation of new data for the sake of it. I think what we need is a better use of the data we have. And in that sense, we need tools and we need interfaces, we need visualization to make sense of it. And I guess that's part of the reason why I do what I do and the reason for my job. Because, look at our most used product, which are the analysis, the rerun of the weather prediction model over the historical period. So we can, if you're interested in knowing what the weather was like the hour you were born, no matter where you were on the planet, then you can see. You can.
Where would I go for that?
You like that? It's on the Climate Data Store. So it's
Climate Data Store.
Yeah, okay. cds.climate.copernicus.eu. Mm-hmm. And you look for ERA 5, which is this data set. And then you have to fiddle, and work with it. If you want, I can pass you the script on how to do it. But actually, knowing the weather of the day you were born can be fun. But it turns out that having a description of any weather parameter, any parameter of the atmosphere or the ocean, at any given point on the planet for the last 70 years, up until 5 days ago, is really important for so many applications. It can be agriculture, it can be insurance, farming, finance, doesn't matter. You need that information. And so that's by far our most popular product. And this product is of the order of 10 petabytes.
10 petabytes?
Yes.
That's how many zeros? A bunch of them.
15. Yeah, quite a few. But this is exactly what. So we have the data. It's a huge volume, but we just ship the data just to give you an image, so we can talk images. So we just move our data center from Reading in the UK to Bologna in Italy, and we shipped all this magnetic tape with the archive, and there are several lorries full of this magnetic tape to move them over.
Wow!
So it's not something you can put on a memory stick, let alone a floppy disk, or on a DVD. You need to have a system that allows you to slice that data, to transform it into something that makes sense, to tell you, how many days a year it rains in Vienna, or what is the maximum wind gust that's ever been recorded in Madrid, or something else, whatever it is the parameter you like. Right? And this is best done if we put a cloud computing close to the data that does the calculation for you, slice the data for you, and generate that few kilobytes of information that you need. So basically, that's what we do. And I think that's useful. But otherwise, I wouldn't do it. Because we have, as you said, huge amount of information, of data, but it's all about transforming that data into information.
Making sense. Great. Absolutely fascinating. So, so it's about creating stories, also creating stories out of that vast sea of data, right?
Yes. I think that's true. I mean, the stories are for us are a useful tool, especially for communication purposes. So in a sense, there are many of these stories that we have developed. Each one fully one of these thread, on how a specific person has been using one of this information, and they are quite powerful in terms of storytelling. But they also reflect the reality on the ground. Who are I was in Sharm el-Sheikh last week, and we were presenting an application that we developed with you for the Mediterranean about health and looking at suitability of the tiger mosquito. So tiger mosquito wasn't a species prevalent in Europe or in the Mediterranean. It was coming from Southeast Asia. It arrived in Europe maybe 20 years ago, and adapted itself very well and started to thrive. And unfortunately, well, not only is it's quite annoying if you enjoy spending the summer out in the garden or out and about, but it's also a vector for some diseases such as chikungunya or dengue fever. So I think that the question is, how likely is this to spread farther or to become even more prevalent than it is now?
Sure.
And then, you can interrogate the data and try to find out. And then you discover that actually, as always, the data tells you more story than you expect, because you can think, temperature going up, so we'll have, it would be terrible. Well, in certain regions, it will get worse. And strangely enough, in some regions, it will get better because it will get so hot that it's even too hot for that mosquito
to live. Yeah.
Yeah, for that mosquito to live. So, just one of the many stories that we have developed.
Carlo, if I understand that current debate correct, and after that we'll move to COP27 in a second. It's not about talking if things are happening. It's all about how can we adapt to climate change. And this is maybe one of the reasons why some of the information that you are digging up, you are producing, is being of interest to the farming industry or insurance industries or whatnot, because it's all about adapting to change. So we're in the middle of a transition of our planet, and we are becoming part of that transition very consciously, because we're trying to react now. So we're not trying to mitigate. We're not trying to stop climate change. We're trying to live with it. Am I overinterpreting things?
No, I think you're right. I guess the two elements go hand in hand. So on the one hand, we must mitigate, because that's the only long-term solution. So we know that the problem, the main driver is carbon emissions, and so we need to reduce the emission. We need to get to net zero. That's the only long-term way forward. But while this is the long-term strategy, at the same time, we also know that for the foreseeable future, many of the impact will happen irrespective of our decision in terms of emissions. So if you look at the sea level, for me, sea level is probably one of the most clear example, because whatever we do on sea level for the next, not only for the next 50 years, but for the next 200 years and more, the sea level will continue to rise, right? And so we don't have really a choice there. It's a relentless increase, and if we do something, we may be able to reduce the rise by the end of the century, to reduce what the grandchildren of our grandchildren will see in a few hundred years. But there is no way. We don't see any scenario in which the sea level will go down, right?
Okay.
And for the temperature, fortunately, things are slightly better, in the sense that what we do now on the emission will have an impact on the temperature at the end of the century. So the lag is not as long. But nevertheless, for the next 20, 30 years, basically our decision today don't matter that much.
But that means...
So it means that we need to adapt. So in that sense... That
means we need to adapt, but also that this means the end of some coastal areas on this planet. So the dice have been cast for those places, and we're talking about millions of people.
Well, in a sense, it means, yes, it will have a significant impact on many coastal community and coastal resources. It's going to happen, and so it's a matter of getting prepared and getting organized. For sea level, we have time, in the sense that it's not happening tomorrow. It's not an on-off switch. It's something gradual, and we tend to be better at adapting at global, rapid processes than we have to.
You're the director at the European Center for Medium-Range Weather Forecasts, and you're drawing your
I'm the director of the Copernicus Climate Change Service at ECMWF. That's right.
Yes. And Copernicus Climate Change means drawing information from a fleet of satellites that is especially looking at Europe, or am I mistaken?
Well, the satellites have a global coverage, right? They spin around the planet and they cover all areas of the planet. And that's true for the majority of products which we are providing or generating or providing access to. There are in some cases, some high resolution product for Europe or some specific problem for Europe. At the end of the day, it's a European program. But the vast majority of what we offer, which is open and free and unrestricted, are global. So anyone on the planet can benefit from it.
And so we have a fleet of satellites that have different agendas. So you have one satellite taking care of sea levels, and the other one you have taking care of temperatures and
it's more or less. I probably it's easier to look at it in terms of kind of instruments. So some instruments are looking at the microwave. Some instruments have an altimeter on board, a radar. Some other are looking at the visible part of the spectrum, and so on. And then this information is processed in different way to get information about the sea level, about the sea ice, about soil moisture, and the like. But yes, fundamentally, yes.
Do you have personal favorite data set, or a most surprising data some data set you like most, or you were surprised about most?
That's an interesting question. I don't think I was asked this question before. A data set that I like the most, or I have a personal attachment to. I have to think about it.
Sure, no problem.
I guess. Well, I don't want to go back to what I was saying before about the reanalysis, but in a sense, reanalysis surprised me because I was coming from climate when I joined ECMWF, and at the beginning I thought, well, why they're offering reanalysis is not really climate, is a byproduct of weather prediction. I think they are ECMWF is using what they were doing before just to make the case, but it's not really appropriate. And then over the years I realized how wrong I was, because actually now that I see and it's really looking at the statistic of the user uptake and how widely this has been used, that you realize how fundamental that information is to everyone. And in a sense is the best proxy we have to a global observational data set, because I'm coming from observation. I used to build instrument myself, so I know how difficult it is to take a measurement and make it fly it on a satellite. But when you retrieve from that satellite a physical observable, this being, I don't know, sea ice or soil moisture or sea surface temperature or the like, then you often have a process where that original information is pre-processed, you use a priori, you do an iterative algorithm to get what you want. Well, in a sense, we are doing the same with the reanalysis, with the weather prediction model through data simulation. But rather than having just one, we have all the observation together. Clearly, it's not perfect, but it's really quite good. And we have statistics on things that do not work as they should, and we know where to improve things. So it's very valuable, even for us. But what I found surprising is how valuable it was for the users. So probably it's the one I would pick.
Wonderful. COP27 climate conference. You mentioned last week you went to the conference. Publicly through the mouth of globalized media outlets. You could get the impression that this is there's a lot of criticism about that conference, where it is going on, in what form it is going on. How did you perceive the conference personally?
It's I think it's a mix of factors, mix of emotions. So on the one side, I thought it was really strange to discuss about climate change in a resort in the middle of the desert with air conditioning going like mad. So I thought it was just a dissonance in many respect. And I criticized in the past the COP because it may look a bit like a circus where you gather all these people there, they talk, and then nothing happened. At the same time, this time I found it quite useful personally. I thought that there were a lot of useful connection being made, a lot of development, and there was at least among the people I spoke to, there was a genuine interest towards, or a pressure to find some sort of a solution, or to push for that solution. It's always a trade-off. So we try to go there as a program with the smallest possible delegation to reduce the travel, and so this meant that we ended up with just a very small team there, and all overstretched and overcommitted. But we thought it was the right thing to do, and and I thought it was very useful, to be honest.
Wonderful, Carlo. Thank you so much for taking the time. We have two unusual questions at the end of our show.
Right.
Question number one is because we deeply and strongly believe in a future, or I believe in a future as an interplanetary species at some point. But getting somewhere will take some time because space is a vast and boring place, I guess. Getting from A to B takes some time. So you might want to bring a Spotify playlist on board to keep you entertained. And we initiated a Spotify playlist for just that. So what tune will you introduce to that playlist? And I will happily introduce it as we speak. What kind of song wouldn't you want to miss for that journey?
Okay. So I guess that I have three albums, I think. I always use when I need to write, and they're always the same.
Okay.
Because the only thing that works for me is non-vocal when I need to write, because otherwise I get distracted. And is Kind of Blue, Miles Davis. The piano concerto of Mozart, played by Eschenbach, and the Cold Concert by Keith Jarrett.
So I'm just taking notes. Good. Which one was it by Miles Davis?
Kind of Blue.
Okay. Wonderful. Okay, cool. And question number two. Well, you're the first Italian I can speak to about coffee, because the Space Café Podcast is a coffee place, a digital coffee place. So, of course, now and then you'd like to have a good espresso to energize yourself. And now I'd like you and myself to share an espresso for the mind, to energize our mind, to be able to inspire our audiences. So why don't you share an espresso with me and the audience for the mind? You can pick whatever kind of topic you want to pick. Something.
Well, what is an espresso for the mind?
It's any kind of piece of information you think could be inspiring to our audiences, energizing to the audience. A good idea, maybe, or something that inspired you, and you feel like, well, this could also inspire audiences. Energize them.
Okay. Yes, I think I do have something, but I don't know. Inspired, I'm more learned, I think, possibly, but I'm fascinated by language, and there was a podcast I was listening to, and actually then this generated a number of other thoughts. But in this podcast, it was about the connection of our ability to think and our way of expressing ourselves. So the language as a key tool. And so there was this experiment where you put a reward in a corner of a box, and then you put a mouse in the box, and the mouse goes to the corner. Then you flip the box a bit, and then the two corners look the same, and so 50% of the mouse goes one direction, 50% go the other, and then you paint one of the walls so that you can distinguish one from the other. And surprisingly, mouse do not recognize that corner, so it's still 50-50. And then you do the same with kids, and I think you have to reach age 6 something before the kids perform better than mice.
Really?
Yeah, and that's basically, that was what the podcast was saying. It was because at that time you start to be able to, year 5 or 6, to build a sentence like, is on the bottom right corner of the blue wall, something. So where you have multiple adjectives for location. Before that, you don't. And so the fact you can make that sentence, that you can have that thought, allows you to do things that you wouldn't be able to do before. Right? So it allows you to have this thought in your mind, the fact that you can express it verbally. And nice. the entire podcast was all about that. And so I'm wondering, and I don't have an answer for it, but I'm wondering whether part of the problem that we face as humanity at the moment, so the climate crisis, depends or can be solved by just having the right words for it. Maybe we miss a good way of talking about the problem to see the solution.
That's very interesting. Very interesting. Because I feel like whenever we are experiencing something personally, like a pregnancy, for example, where you and myself were talking as from a father's perspective, but still, once pregnancy is a thing, you see pregnant women all over the place, and you see strollers and you see babies, because that piece of language is entering the focus of your attention. And you wouldn't have seen that otherwise. And so maybe that holds a deep truth to what you're saying, that we're still lacking the words for what is going on, because maybe climate change is too big for our minds. We learned, if I'm not mistaken, we learned from Plato, I think it was, that there is a maximum number of people we're able to live together with in a community. And that community is rather small. So I'd say it's a couple of hundred people. And now we are in a globalized context, being confronted with a globalized number of data points with a very local mind, because like historically, we're still cavemen and cave women. Nothing much has changed ever since. We've been on this planet now as Homo sapiens for 200,000 years, if I'm not mistaken. So we still have that old mindset, but we're being thrown into that globalized world. And I think this is something, and now the circle is closing, where you need to come in with that new vocabulary, at least asking for that new vocabulary, because we're not ready for it yet. So we have opened that can of worms.
Yes, well,
but still we're children.
Yeah, but I think it's nice, in a sense, this is a challenge for the future generation. So it is a problem we haven't solved, and it is nice to offer a challenge. You say, well, part of the problem may be just the fact that we don't have the grammar, the we don't have the word to describe the problem and so to appreciate it, to understand it, and so solve it. And maybe that's something someone else that has the right skill can take on board and generate the tools for this global conversation you're talking about, which we failed to have yet.
Wonderful. That was very inspiring. Carlo Buontempo, thank you so much for taking the time and being part of that podcast.
Thank you, Marcus.
Thank you for listening today. I hope you liked the show. Please consider giving us a rating on iTunes or Spotify. It's literally a 10-second investment on your smartphone that would help the Space Café podcast heaps. Thank you all for your growing interest. We are looking forward to serving you a fresh brew in just 2 weeks' time. Bye-bye. Till then, stay tuned.